Today, I sit down with Beth. She talks about her experience losing her mother to dementia. And it is one of those stories that's familiar and a lot of people can relate to it. And it's the caregiver's journey through guilt, through management of finances, tantrums, behavioral changes, um, and doing so internationally, which is what a lot of people are facing. And I really hope what you take from this is to be patient with yourself during this journey because it sounds like it's a really hard one. And if you'll never go through it, can learn tips on how to support those who are caring for people with dementia. Enjoy. Hi, Beth. How you doing?
Hi, Jess. I'm great, thanks. How are you doing?
You look fabulous. I'm good. So, everyone listening, Beth has known me since before I was born. You knew me when I was in my mommy's tummy. Yeah.
I did.
We go way back. Beth is the mother of my sister's best friend, Samantha, who's pretty much like a sister to me as well. So she's kind of like a second mama. We grew up together. Well, I mean, I
Yep.
grew up with you watching.
This is true, and I just grew older. Happens to us all.
What happens to us all. So what's Bermuda like today? Has the weather been shining?
Oh God, it's gorgeous. It's like summer. It's
Classic.
hot today.
Nice.
It's bright and sunny, and yeah, we need some rain though.
Okay.
Usual stuff.
We never say that here in England.
No, you don't.
So it would be great to hear what dementia means to you.
The difference between, and we had this conversation because you didn't know the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's. And quite frankly, I didn't either. My mother-in-law also suffered from dementia, and we learned the difference with her in that Alzheimer's is a degenerative brain disease. It's identifiable with scans. They can definitely see and diagnose that somebody has Alzheimer's. Now, dementia is a symptom that you develop when you have Alzheimer's. So you won't find an Alzheimer's patient who doesn't have dementia, right?
Yeah.
But you won't find that a dementia patient necessarily has Alzheimer's, because dementia is just a broad term for mental decline and brain dysfunction. And something else that's a misconception is dementia is not a byproduct of aging. Not everybody is going to develop dementia simply because they get old. You know, you hear that all the time. People say, oh my God, I'm getting so old, my brain is foggy. And, you know, that's not necessarily true. Look at Betty White. I mean, she was sharp as a tack to 100 years old. But there's a lot of factors that affect what happens to your body and to your brain. And it's pretty much environmental pollutants, substance abuse, vitamin deficiency, being overweight, smoking, and probably even genetic factors, I think, to a certain degree. But the other area that I think, and this is what largely affected my mother, is trauma and anxiety and depression, and those things going untreated and unrecognized, because in her era, it wasn't, you didn't talk about things like that. You didn't complain about things like that. And it was a sign of weakness to say that you needed to take medication. So she really didn't for the longest time.
You believe her trauma was what led to her dementia because it was untreated?
Oh, absolutely. She had, and I'll give you a bit of her history because it's important to understand. And it's difficult. I debated whether to basically air all the laundry, but I think it's important for people to know these things. And I know you've done this yourself personally, has been on this podcast. My mother was born in very poor circumstances in Alabama during the Depression. And her mother was a deaf mute, Her father was, well, she never spoke about her father very much. I knew what his name was, and I saw some photographs of him, but he basically abandoned her and her brother when she was quite young, I think, maybe 5 or under. Grandmother, her mother, as I said, was a deaf mute and was very poor. She developed tuberculosis on top of everything else. So the state took my mother and her brother away from my grandmother and put them in foster care, separated them and put them in separate foster homes. She was 8 and he was 4. They didn't see each other, I think, until they were teenagers, mid-teens after that. And my mother was put with a very strict Baptist minister in his family, which included 5 brothers, stepbrother or foster brothers. She never outright said this, but she certainly hinted and alluded to it. But she was abused by those brothers.
Oh my God.
And possibly even the minister himself. I don't know. She'd clam up and she wouldn't talk about it. She just didn't want to talk about it. So I didn't press it with her. She was a very, very bright woman. She, despite all this adversity, so young in her life, she was a top student and she actually skipped 2 grades. So she graduated when she was 16 from high school. At that time, or really actually earlier, when she was 15, she was scouted by a photographer and given a contract to be a Coca-Cola girl.
Yes, and
model.
she was the blonde Coca-Cola famous girl that we all know of today.
Well, they changed her hair color all the time.
Really?
In one ad she was a brunette, another ad she was a blonde. That was very exciting, and of course the Baptist minister thought it was a sin, so that caused conflict in their household. She also then did something unbelievable. She married at 17 the high school star quarterback. And their marriage was annulled after 3 months because she discovered he was a terrible alcoholic that he had hidden quite well, but they were able to annul the marriage on non-consummation. Whether that's true or not, I have no idea, but she got out of that one.
Wow, I find it so crazy you need to give a reason to get a divorce. Like, it's not just, we don't want to be together.
I know. Well, Bermuda is trying to deal with no-fault divorces now, which would be a real step in the right direction. But from that point, she then did something else very astounding. She and women just didn't go to college in the 50s, late 40s and 50s. She enrolled in University of Columbus, Georgia, and she did 2 years of credits in 1 year while working part-time as a hostess in a social club. So, but she couldn't afford to go back. So she then got an opportunity to go to Cuba, pre-communist Cuba, and she worked in a nightclub there for a year. Now, she was 18, 19 years old. Can you imagine? At any rate, after that, she returned to the States and she met my father in Fort Benning, Georgia. And after 3 months, they got engaged and they moved to Philadelphia, which is where he was from. And, from there, they were married 23 years. They had a relatively happy marriage, but she wasn't happy. She's I think the best description from my mother is the word driven. Obviously, for her to overcome all the adversity she did, she had to be very focused. And my father wanted different things. She wanted different things. And it was an amicable parting of the ways. And so then she went and she got a real estate license and became a broker. And she eventually married my stepfather, Pat Welsh. And I call this the happy phase of her life because he was the love of her life and she was very, very happy. Besides just the emotional trauma that my mother did go through and then goes through for later on, she was undiagnosed with Crohn's disease for much of her life.
Oh, wow.
It was only discovered when she was 47 years old when she had emergency abdominal surgery because she had a foot-long blockage. They had been telling her from the age of about 32 or 34 that she had osteoarthritis, because those were all the symptoms. And very little was known about Crohn's then.
Yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
talking in the 60s, 50s, 60s. So, you know, Crohn's disease is something you're pretty much born with. You don't develop it.
Yes.
So she must have suffered for many, 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 many years. And then for them to discover that that's what it was, you know, she lived with a lot of chronic pain for a long time, which affects your brain and your functioning and those cells, you know, that part of
Yeah.
your brain.
Yeah.
So at any rate, so she moved to Florida with my stepfather. And what got a little bit challenging for me is that, yeah, I wasn't able to see her as frequently. At least when she was in Philadelphia, it was just a quick plane ride. But for me to get to Florida, it takes all day to get there. It takes all day to come back. So I really wasn't able to see her that much.
Yeah.
She'd come to Bermuda a couple times a year. I would say when she was in her mid 60s, I first started to notice, in telephone conversations primarily, that she was forgetting things. And she'd laugh it off. Oh, silly me, you know, and, you know,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't mean that. And, you know, so a little concern, a little check, but, you know, my not understanding dementia, and didn't really know anything about Alzheimer's. I wasn't even going there. I just thought, you know, she's getting older. She's, you know, memory's slipping.
Yeah, because you think so. Can I just ask you a question before you go into that? What you
Mm-hmm.
said earlier about Betty White. So is memory loss not a part of getting older?
I think it depends on the individual,
Mm.
right? And again, what you've done to your body and what you do, you know, that affects your brain cells, because really dementia is just damaged brain cells. And
Okay.
you know, as I
Okay.
say,
Yeah.
if you're into a lot of drugs and alcohol and smoking affects it.
So, Beth,
Yeah.
from the research that I did, dementia, the definition is affecting memory, thinking, and social abilities, which ultimately impact like your daily life.
Mm-hmm.
For your mother, she was living in a nursing home at this point when she was diagnosed, or was she living at home with your stepfather?
No, she really wasn't diagnosed per
Oh,
se.
okay. Okay.
She and my stepfather, I know my stepfather must have known. He was living with her full time.
Yeah.
I didn't really know either until I actually spent 2 to 3 weeks with her at the
Yeah.
time when my stepfather passed away. I realized, oh, she's missing a lot of beats here. And it's not just grief.
Okay.
She had a catalyst event in his death that really pushed the dementia to the
Mm,
forefront.
mm.
He was diagnosed with lung cancer and he was dead in 10 weeks.
Oh my
And
God.
she was not prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I think that just brought everything forward.
Yeah.
And you know, I went and was with her 2 weeks before he died. So I was with her while he was in hospice.
Mm.
And then I was with her when he died. And it was right before Christmas time. And I said, well, Mom, you know, you got to come home with me and have Christmas and stay with us as long as you want. And she said, oh, no, I can't leave. I have too much to do. I said, Mom, that's not acceptable. You're coming with me. I'm not leaving you here by yourself. And she got very stubborn with me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, two can play this game. I said, then you're going to disappoint. I'm going to have to stay and miss Christmas with my family because of you. And I felt awful, but she started to cry. And
Oh,
she said, oh, honey, I could never do that to you. And so she came home with me. But
yeah.
everybody noticed it once she was here.
Okay.
And um, we then when we went back to Florida, we made the decision we had to sell the house because it wasn't going to. She couldn't stay there by herself, not at all.
How did she feel about that decision?
Oh, she fought every decision. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of it is taking away their independence, and the
Yep.
more you take away, the
Yeah.
more you lose them.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you found that with your poppy as well.
Yeah.
You know,
My grandfather,
it's
everyone. Yeah.
particularly very strong individuals who've been very independent their entire lives,
Yeah.
and you start taking away their ability to drive the car, to pay their own bills. Then you move somebody, a stranger, in the house to take care
Yeah.
of them. You know, but they had made provisions to buy into this retirement community, which is just a fabulous community called Shell Point in Fort Myers. And we moved her into an independent apartment, and it was beautiful. She was so happy. It was 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. She was overlooking a marina. You know, we got her a cat. She hated cats. She wanted a dog. I said, Mom, you can't have a dog in this,
Yeah.
but they'll let you have a cat. And she said, oh, and so she loved this cat, but she really never did not like cats. But she was in the independent apartment for about 3 years.
Mm.
And I kept getting phone calls from people who watch people at the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
And they'd say, you know, your mom, we think your mom's getting a little bit confused. And, you know, we just want to keep an eye on her. And, you know,
Yeah.
then she had a near disaster automobile accident. She turned onto the wrong side of a 8-lane highway
Ooh.
and was heading head into the traffic. And that scared her so badly that she voluntarily gave up driving, which was
Oh,
a big
wow.
relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then she, we sold the car. About 6 months after that, I get the phone call. Beth, your mom has reported her car stolen. She was found wandering
Yeah.
around in the car park at 10 o'clock at
Confusion.
night. Yeah. So then we explained, you know, you sold your car. And, oh, I'm so silly. How could I forget that? You know, and this is, Mom was so good at pulling off normal. I'd get phone calls from people and they'd tell me this story that she's told them. And I'd say, that is absolutely not true
Oh,
because they didn't know her and they believed her.
what
And
kind of stories?
oh, she told people that Pat and her had been married for 30 years. She had convinced herself of it.
Yeah.
Um, she'd tell, I don't know, yeah, there's a lot of stories.
Yeah.
But you know, she began to believe her half truths,
Yeah. Okay.
you know, and they
Yeah.
became real to her. They became
Yeah.
her truth then.
Yeah.
So we had to move her to assisted living after that. Oh, and the other thing that happened was she came to visit me, and I hadn't seen her in about 8 months, and she'd lost like 30 pounds. And I said, wow, Mom, you look great. How'd you lose 30 pounds? And she said,
Yeah.
oh, I walk everywhere. I just love to walk. No, she didn't. She didn't walk anywhere.
Yeah.
You know what she did? She forgot to eat.
That's
This
one of the
is,
diagnosis, like the symptoms that I read was loss of like
mm-hmm.
forgetting to eat, and then disliking what you normally eat. So that must have been,
Yeah.
how did you handle that internationally? Because you weren't there. I guess it was comfort to you that you had like that she was in a care home, but yeah.
Right. Well, and that's correct. I mean, obviously, if she had been living with me, I would have been feeding her.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we moved her into assisted living, she gained 20 pounds in the first 2 months because
Okay.
they feed her, right? Didn't have a
Yes.
kitchen to cook anymore. She had a refrigerator. That's the other thing. I used to get phone calls. Mommy, she said, Beth, I don't have where's my stove? I said, Mom, you don't have a stove. You can't cook anymore. She says, I can too. And I said, I know you can, Mom, but they won't let you have it. It's a state law. You can't have anything. You couldn't even have a microwave.
Yeah.
At any
Oh.
rate. So yeah, then she was in assisted living. They were having meals every day. She had to go down for a meal. She couldn't say, no, I'm not hungry. They would, you know, make her go down and eat. Then she progressed. After that, she declined pretty quickly, I would say.
Mm.
Then I got the phone call that, you know, your mom can't remember how to use the elevator. She was on the second floor. So I call it the not being able to see the forest through the trees. You know, she's looking right at it. And first we thought maybe it's her eyesight, but she's always had, you know, never had to wear glasses except reading glasses. She just couldn't, her brain couldn't connect what was up and down in the elevator.
Yeah.
She also had developed vertigo. And, when I'd go and visit her, I'd take her to the movies or to a restaurant or some, even to the grocery store. And she would she'd walk really slowly and she'd be looking down at her feet and like testing the ground with her foot. And I said, Mom, what are you doing? And she said, I'm just being very careful. I don't want to fall. I said, well, that's very smart. I said, here, hold my hand, I'll help you walk.
Yeah.
But, then it got to the point, and then she was falling quite a bit. And so then she fell and she broke her wrist, and they put her in the hospital. And then the memory nurses came to me from Shell Point, and they said, we really think your mother should leave the hospital and go right into the memory ward at the pavilion at Shell Point. And
what would they do? What's the difference between that and where she was?
Well, this was full-time nursing care. So she had a hospital room, whereas her assisted care living apartment was actually a mini version of her independent apartment. So I was actually able to make it look very much like a miniature replica of her 2-bedroom place. It had all her furniture and her paintings and stuff. And that was a difficult move to get her in there. She cried and cried, and she said she would be a good girl, and it broke my heart. I had to do it to her, so.
How did you manage that kind of like guilt feeling?
I don't think you can manage it. You just, this is one thing I'd like to say, and I think it's an impossible thing to do, is try to give yourself a break and not feel guilty. I feel guilty on some levels because I thought I could have been kinder. I could have been more patient with her. But I realized in thinking about it that it was, my own fear and being upset at losing the strongest person in my life was my mother. And, that hurt to lose her. And then to have her not know who I was the worst part. But on other levels, I think she felt comfortable with me. She might not have turned around and said, oh, honey. She always called me honey. She did that about a year before she died. And I was so happy. I said, oh my God, she knows me. And then I thought, maybe she calls more people than me honey now. So I went to the nurses. I said, does my mother call you honey? And they said, no, maybe they were just being kind. But I think on many levels, she felt comfortable with me. And when she was dying and I was with her, I sang to her and she sang with me, and squeezed my hand, and she looked me right in the eye, which is something else that dementia patients don't do. They stop making eye contact. Basically, I think what my mom wanted is she went to a happy place in her dementia. She really did. She loved to sing, but she wanted to be left alone in her happy place. Okay. So she came and her best friend Barbara came and visited her with me about 2 years before she died. And Mom loved Barbara. They were very, very good friends. And Barbara sat down and was trying to talk to her and engage her. And my mom was just basically being monosyllabic, not looking at her, nodding or whatever. And I had gone to get something, came back, and Barbara told me, she said, I asked your mom if there's anything I could do for her. And she said, shut up. Just tell Barbara to shut up. Stop talking.
That's something interesting I wanted to touch on is how do you maintain being patient with someone who can be so agitated?
Well, I don't know how people manage it and caregive, without any help. With my mother-in-law, Sheila, we had an army of wonderful Filipinos who lived with her that alleviated Fiona, Greg, and me having to actually, do the daily routine. but the one day a week that we did have her, it was challenging, because it was like taking care of a 150-pound baby. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sheila was one of those ones who got angry, not
Did
a happy
she?
place.
Yeah.
She got angry. I got
Yeah.
whacked on the head more than once.
Really? So she got physical.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, there can be a lot of abuse. And, when you think about, a big, strong man becoming that way, and you're a woman that maybe is 50, 60, or 100 pounds less,
Yeah.
and you're trying to take care of them, there's all sorts of functionalities. You've got to help them to the bathroom, you have to help them dress, you have to feed them, you have to get them in and out of bed. So I think at what I've understood from people who do that sort of full care, they develop health problems, and it negatively impacts them.
Yeah, their
So it
mental
goes back
health.
to the same thing. You're talking about more trauma at a
Mm,
point that maybe my encouragement to people is you got to get the help. You've
yeah.
got to get the help.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't do it all. You can't say, this is my husband or this is my mother and it's my duty. It's my
Yeah.
duty to suffer with them. No,
Mm,
it's not. It's not. That's the last thing they would want,
yeah.
really, at the
Yeah.
end of the day.
So how
Yeah.
long did your mother suffer in this way before she passed?
Um, but she was pretty good through about 3 years into her assisted living before she started to develop the vertigo issues, and then fell and broke her wrist. Very subtle. I mean, she arrived in Bermuda the last time she flew by herself to Bermuda. She came out of the arrivals hall and she didn't have any luggage. I said, Mom, where's your luggage?
Oh
She said, oh,
no.
I'm traveling light. That's exactly what she said. I said, Mom, where's your luggage?
No, she didn't.
She'd forgotten her luggage. She left it in Philadelphia. She left it. She checked in. The people who were checking her in I don't know why they didn't say, Madam, is that your bags, Or maybe they didn't. She said, oh, no, they're not mine. I could see her doing that.
Oh
But,
my God.
that had major consequences because all her medication was in her bags.
Oh God. Oh
So
God.
yeah, she couldn't fly alone anymore. So I had to have companions do that and
Yeah.
whatnot. So
Yeah.
I would say from her mid-60s to really she knew me up until I would say she was about 83 or 84, and then from that point, the last 5 years of her life, she really went internal. And even the Shell Point people, they would say, because they call me and give me an update and say, oh, your mother loves to sing. That's her favorite part. And, they do art with them, and she loved to watch movies. These poor people, they must have watched The Wizard of Oz 1,000 times because that was her favorite movie. And she's just stopped wanting to do any of that stuff. And then eventually she didn't want to get out of bed.
Oh.
Right. So
Yeah.
and then she was wheelchair bound. She couldn't get up and walk.
Yeah.
And she also, the other thing that she did, it manifested itself with teeth grinding. I think she always grinded her teeth because of anxiety. But she ground them so badly that literally we had to have all her lower teeth removed. They had become stubs. And
Oh.
that again is another thing. She also was picking at her scalp, and then eventually on her arms and her, I don't know why that is how it manifested itself, but she had to wear these sleeves to stop her from scratching.
Oh God.
Yeah, that was tough.
Mhm.
It's not something she was aware that she was doing, that she could
Yeah.
stop doing, because yeah.
So when was the moment she forgot you, and what did that feel like?
I can't remember exactly when. It was just one of the visits that I went to. And, ordinarily it would take her for a minute because she wasn't used to seeing me every day.
Yeah.
She'd look at me and she'd go, oh, hi, honey,
Yeah.
You know, and then she'd be fine.
Yeah.
Then one time I arrived and she wasn't participating with anything. She was just sitting at a table by herself. And I went and I sat down next to her and I, said, "Hi, Mom." And she didn't even look at me, and I said, it's Beth, Mom, it's your daughter. And, there was no reaction, really. There was no reaction. I mean, so
Yeah.
from that point, I didn't have a name anymore with her.
Yeah.
And how did it feel? Well, at that point, I knew it was coming. I can't say it didn't negatively affect me or impact me. It did. I think I left and I went back to the hotel and cried.
Yeah. So my mom always says when your kids grow up, like once you stop having to take care of your children, your parents turn into kids and then you have to start caring
Right.
for them. Is
It's true.
it is the I'm like, "Oh my god, don't have kids anytime soon, Jess, because apparently you can't come off that train forever." Um, but, like, how did you handle that of, you were just a mom and then all of a sudden you're now having to be a mom to your own mother. What was that shift like in dynamic?
Well, it was huge. I mean, it was a huge amount of responsibility, because Pat had passed away. I had to undertake to sell her house.
Mm.
I'm doing this all, long distance. I had to make numerous trips down to Florida that year. We had to buy her new place in Shell Point. I had to take over all her bank accounts. I had her
Yeah.
power of attorney. Um, but yeah, trying to work through all that on top of my own life, which
Yeah, your
I was
job.
living,
How do you do
and
you
the
even
kids
get time
were,
off work to be a carer?
well, yeah, I was working as a commission only real estate agent at that time frame. So my time was my own, but obviously
Mm.
I wasn't here selling houses. I wasn't making any money.
Yeah.
But Greg was working at that time. So, we managed, but we were going through the girls finishing school and then starting college and,
Oh my gosh.
all of that stuff. And, I quite frankly, it always falls on one child. There might be three children or there might be two children,
Yes.
but it really, one person takes that responsibility on, because you can't have disagreements between siblings over the care. There's got to be somebody who takes charge of it. So my mother actually chose me over my brother, even though he's older. Something he struggled with.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I said, it's her wish, Mike. We can't tell her what she wishes.
Yeah.
She wants me to. Plus, they had a turbulent relationship, to say mildly.
Oh, really?
He
Okay.
loved her and she loved him, but he reminded her too much of my father and the reasons why she divorced him. So another dynamic
That must
there.
have cut deep. Yeah,
My
from her.
mother had sought help earlier in her life for the trauma that she experienced as a child,
Yeah.
instead of trying to basically, well, what she did is she moved north. She
Yeah.
left her life behind in the South, and she reinvented herself
Mm.
and became a new. When I was a young girl, she had a Southern accent. Mayor Rose, she was as Southern came.
Yeah.
She worked so hard to get rid of her Southern accent because she thought it made people think she wasn't smart.
Oh,
So
yeah. So how did you during this time take care of your own mental health? You said you had the stress of paying for tuitions for your children, um, trying to care for her internationally, the guilt that came with that. Did you carve out time for yourself and what did that look like?
I can't say that I really did. In a lot of respects, I'm a lot like my mother in that I shoulder most stuff myself, and I tend to not want to burden other people with what bothers me. I'll tell you what helps me, has always helped me tremendously, is I have a very strong network of friends, of girlfriends and guy friends, but and your mother being one of them, is truly a very one of the most compassionate people I've ever met in my life. I
She
swear, I
really
used to
is.
say to
Shout
her,
out,
"You have
mama.
she has volume flowing through her bloodstream for what she's done in her professional life."
Yeah.
Um, you know, and having the support of Greg, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm okay. I mean, my mother made absolutely certain that I had the perfect childhood. She really
Oh,
did. She was just a wonderful, lovely, beautiful woman.
yeah. Is that her behind you in the picture?
That is, yep, yep, yep.
Mimi.
That's actually, it's one of my favorite pictures of her.
She
You
looks
can see it.
fantastic. The final two questions coming to an end. We
Hmm.
always end with advice. So the
Hmm.
first question is, um, what advice would you give to those people who are caring for their loved ones with dementia?
Get help. Don't try to do it all yourself. Be patient.
Mm,
Be patient. They don't know what's going on. They're frightened. They might not say they're frightened. They might be expressing it in anger, but that's just an expression of being afraid too.
yeah.
So be
Yeah.
patient, be compassionate, and if you find that you can't, you've got to remove yourself from it. Because you're not going to help them or you if you're combative with them.
Yeah. I'd also add to that and say, like, also, like, be patient with yourself because I think with like parent daughter, parent son relationships, you fall back into old patterns perhaps of like arguing. It's like one of your oldest patterns. So to be patient with yourself if you lose it because they're losing it, and forgive yourself, if you haven't had that time to make up with them. And
Hmm.
final question,
Hmm.
advice for helping others who are caring for people with dementia. Like, how could your friends have supported you in that situation, or partner?
I didn't ask for any help. See, that's the thing. Say all my friends were there for me. They knew what I was going through. And then on top of it all, I completely forgot. Yeah, I had breast cancer.
During this
So
time?
yes, during this time, I did.
Oh, Beth.
So stress might have brought that on. Maybe I was internalizing that stress
Wow.
um, too. So yeah, that was yeah. How could I forget?
Yeah, honestly, wow, that's crazy, Beth. So,
Yeah.
if someone had said to you, because you weren't able to ask for help, and I know a lot of people aren't, how can they support a friend who won't ask for help?
Just do acts of kindness, like just
Mm,
say, hey, can I go to the grocery store for your mom? Can you give me the list? I've got the time. Or let me take your mom to the doctor.
yeah.
Those sort of things. Or hey, when was the last time you had a spa day? Let me
Mm,
take care of your mother for the day and you go and relax.
yeah. Okay.
So,
Well, thank you so much, Beth, for coming on. Um,
oh, you're welcome, Jess. Thank you for having and listening.
and shout out to Mimi
Yeah,
and her journey.
yeah, she's in my closet.
What?
Yeah, no, we were gonna have her memorial in June of
Oh,
2020.
okay. Sorry, her ashes are
So
in your closet.
I have her ashes in my closet.
Oh my
Yeah.
god, I thought you
So
were like making a joke that you ended up just like killing
no,
her.
no,
I was like,
COVID. But she's happy. She's next to my shoes.
"Oh,
Uh,
nice." Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
I've got to do something. I don't think we're going to have the memorial. I think I'm going to take her out and plant her in our vegetable garden or
that
a
is
flower garden.
beautiful.
She'd like that because she was such a wonderful gardener. So
Oh, that's beautiful.
anyway,
Thank you so much, Beth. Love you so much,
all
and
right.
speak
Love you
soon.
too, Jessica. Thank you so much, sweetheart. You're a
I don't think
wonderful
I've ever said
girl.
love you to a guest. This is hilarious. That's not how I normally sign off. But that is how Beth and I sign off. So, love you, Beth. Bye.
Okay, babe. Love you too. Take care. Thank you so much.